A single folded origami flower from a 10-year-old girl was all it took to dismantle a billion-dollar corporate empire and send Chicago's most arrogant elites to prison. Inside the Obsidian Tower, CEO Arthur Sterling prepared for an exclusive charity auction, while his chief financial officer Marcus smirked confidently. Marcus had secretly embezzled $50 million and orchestrated a fatal system lockdown to wipe out Arthur tonight, masking his massive fraud as a tragic technical accident. Amidst the custom-tailored suits, Lily, the quiet daughter of the night shift maid, was entirely invisible. Dismissed by the elites, no one realized this underestimated child had deciphered the building's lethal override codes. Just seconds before Arthur triggered the fatal lockdown, Lily slipped past security and pressed the paper flower into the billionaire's hand. Her eyes were terrified as Arthur read the 6 words inside. "It's a trap, don't panic." Before we dive into this thrilling story, let me know what time it is and which city you are watching from, so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Please drop a comment and subscribe to our channel to support us. Inside the quiet office on the top floor, the air conditioning temperature seemed to drop a few degrees as Bradley Hayes unfolded the quartered paper. He stared at the 6 hastily scribbled words, absorbing their gravity without allowing a single muscle in his face to twitch. A lesser man might have panicked or immediately summoned his guards, but the chief executive officer of this telecommunications empire had built his fortune on calculated logic rather than impulsive reactions. He examined the physical characteristics of the note, noticing the uneven pressure of the ink and the slightly torn edge of the cheap notebook paper. It was undeniably the handwriting of a child, and his mind instantly pictured Samantha, the exceptionally bright 10-year-old daughter of Heather, the night shift janitor. Bradley had observed the girl multiple times, sitting quietly in the service hallways, reading complex technical manuals discarded by the engineering team, while her mother scrubbed the marble floors. He knew she possessed a mind that absorbed details invisible to others, making her warning far more credible than any standard threat assessment report. The child's terrified eyes from moments ago flashed in his memory, serving as a catalyst that connected several disturbing anomalies he had noticed over the past 3 weeks. He walked slowly toward the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Seattle skyline, piecing together the subtle inconsistencies in the quarterly financial statements presented by Derek, his chief operating officer and longtime college friend. Derek had been aggressively pushing for a complete overhaul of the automated building management system, claiming it would optimize energy efficiency. But Bradley now realized the proposed software update created a terrifying vulnerability in the localized life support protocols. The financial reports had shown massive capital diversions, masked as server maintenance costs, which perfectly aligned with the preparation of a catastrophic sabotage event. If Derek was orchestrating a massive fraud and planning to use tonight's charity gala as a smokescreen to eliminate him, then the entire internal security apparatus, including Victor, the head of security, might already be compromised or willfully blind. Trusting the standard protocols was a guaranteed death sentence, so Bradley bypassed his sleek corporate communication devices and opened a concealed biometric compartment beneath his solid oak desk. He retrieved a heavy, outdated satellite phone, completely disconnected from the Obsidian Tower network, and dialed a heavily encrypted 12-digit sequence memorized years ago. The line clicked open after a single ring, connecting him directly to Gregory, a former independent cybersecurity contractor and trusted ally who operated exclusively in the digital shadows. Speaking in a low and remarkably steady voice, Bradley relayed the exact phrasing of the child's warning and described the microscopic lag he suddenly noticed in the rotation of the surveillance camera positioned directly above his office door. He commanded Gregory to bypass the main security checkpoints and infiltrate the building through the unmapped subterranean maintenance tunnels, requesting a complete diagnostic sweep of the immediate perimeter. After terminating this connection, Bradley remained motionless in the center of the room, analyzing every ambient sound and monitoring the digital displays on his walls for any further signs of external manipulation. The luxurious silence of his executive suite no longer felt like a symbol of power, but rather the suffocating quiet of an inescapable trap tightening around him. Minutes stretched into an agonizing eternity as he mentally mapped out the architectural blueprints of the floor, searching for blind spots and secondary exits that Derek's overridden system could not electronically seal. Suddenly, the discreet oak paneling concealing the private service corridor slid open without a single mechanical sound, and Gregory stepped out from the shadows carrying a modified signal scanning device that was already pulsing with a rapid and urgent red warning light. Down in the basement supply room area, the pungent odor of industrial cleaning chemicals immediately overwhelmed the senses as Gregory gently pushed open the heavy steel door. He stepped carefully into the cavernous, dimly lit space, finding Heather huddled protectively behind a stack of bulk paper towels, with her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter Samantha, who was trembling slightly but refused to cry out loud. The dedicated night shift janitor looked utterly exhausted, her face exceptionally pale and streaked with silent tears, while the 10-year-old girl maintained an unnervingly calm expression despite the surrounding darkness. Gregory kept his hands entirely visible and spoke in a low, reassuring tone, identifying himself as a trusted associate of the chief executive officer, specifically sent downward to ensure their immediate physical safety. Heather hesitated for a long moment before reaching deep into her faded blue uniform pocket to produce a heavily crumpled legal document, sliding it nervously across the cold concrete floor. Gregory knelt down to scan the dense corporate legal jargon, and his highly experienced eyes quickly identified a completely fraudulent mortgage contract valuing an absolutely staggering $3 million. Heather explained in a trembling, broken whisper that Derek's ruthlessly efficient personal enforcers had violently cornered her in the secluded alleyway behind her modest apartment building exactly 2 days ago, forcing her signature at gunpoint, while threatening to make her disappear permanently if she dared to resist their commands. The enforced terms were brutally simple, stating explicitly that if she ever contacted the local authorities or warned any living soul about the impending technological anomaly, the criminal syndicate would instantly foreclose on her only home, while simultaneously fabricating undeniable digital evidence of severe child neglect. This meticulously manufactured criminal record would absolutely guarantee the state permanently stripping away all her parental custody rights, leaving her vulnerable daughter completely at the mercy of the overburdened public foster care system. The sheer overwhelming ruthlessness of this calculated blackmail effectively silenced the terrified mother. But those arrogant corporate conspirators had fatally underestimated the exceptionally quiet child who always accompanied her during these late facility shifts. Samantha gently pulled away from her mother's desperate embrace and stepped bravely forward, looking directly into the intense eyes of the towering former cybersecurity contractor. The exceptionally bright girl explained that while her mother vigorously scrubbed the mahogany executive boardroom earlier that week, she had stealthily crawled through the primary steel ventilation shafts, seeking an isolated, quiet place to read her advanced technical manuals in peace. That narrow metallic ductwork acted as a perfect natural acoustic funnel, carrying unamplified voices from the adjacent electronically locked server control room directly into her hidden sanctuary. She easily recognized the distinct voice of the chief operating officer, discussing the final critical phases of the building's automated security lockdown sequence, with an unknown external accomplice, plotting maliciously to trap the wealthy gala attendees and deliberately trigger a catastrophic building-wide life support failure. Knowing those wealthy executives would never ever suspect a poor child hiding silently within the ceiling grates, Samantha meticulously memorized the exact sequence of alphanumeric characters they continuously repeated out loud to properly calibrate the localized server bypass protocol. She slowly opened her small left hand, revealing a highly complex string of master system override commands written meticulously across her palm using smeared blue ballpoint ink that she had found discarded near the trash cans. Gregory stared deeply at the intricate technological sequence etched on the young girl's soft skin, and his usually stoic facial expression instantly shifted to pure absolute alarm as his analytical mind quickly processed the embedded execution time parameters, realizing the lethal countdown sequence was scheduled to execute in less than 1 hour. The crystal chandelier lights of the banquet hall cast cold rays upon Bradley's hand-tailored suit as he stepped through the metal detector doorway. The opulent room actively buzzed with the low, steady murmur of Seattle's wealthiest elite, who were sipping expensive vintage champagne while a live string quartet played a classical melody in the background. Before the vigilant billionaire could reach the central reception desk, his estranged younger brother Travis stumbled directly into his path, reeking heavily of imported bourbon and unresolved childhood resentment. Travis loudly mocked the philanthropic endeavor, aggressively pointing a shaky finger at the expensive floral arrangements and slurring his bitter words about forever being the forgotten sibling in their highly successful corporate family. A sudden chilling realization washed over the seasoned telecommunications executive as he calmly sidestepped the aggressive public outburst, recognizing immediately that this highly visible confrontation was intentionally orchestrated to physically distract the few remaining loyal security personnel roaming the crowded floor. His chronically unhappy brother was absolutely nothing more than an unwitting pawn strategically positioned to draw vital visual attention entirely away from the malicious architects of tonight's impending catastrophic disaster. Dismissing the embarrassing drunken spectacle without uttering a single word, Bradley moved purposefully deeper into the densely crowded venue, deliberately scanning the beautifully decorated architectural perimeter until his razor-sharp eyes locked firmly onto his ultimate targets, standing near the panoramic glass windows. Derek, the chief operating officer, looked impeccably dressed and dangerously relaxed, standing proudly beside his elegant wife, Vanessa, who ruthlessly served as the exceptionally cunning head of legal for the global corporation. She offered a remarkably convincing warm smile of deep familial concern, stepping forward smoothly to gently touch Bradley's shoulder while whispering fake, heartfelt sympathies regarding the stressful public scene his intoxicated brother had just caused. Their meticulously rehearsed, sophisticated dialogue felt substantially sharper than a surgical razor blade cleverly disguised behind thick layers of pristine professional courtesy and wildly exaggerated corporate affection. Vanessa expertly dominated the tense conversation, praising his visionary technological leadership, while subtly maneuvering him step by step toward the geometric center of the highly isolated VIP lounge area located far away from the reinforced main exit doors. Derek confidently chimed in, expressing his extreme excitement about the highly anticipated automated software demonstration, assuring his college friend that tonight would permanently cement their company's undisputed legacy in the incredibly competitive technology market. Every single calculated word they spoke was a constructed legal maneuver designed perfectly to establish their total, undeniable innocence and their unwavering public loyalty in front of dozens of high-profile wealthy witnesses right before the catastrophic hardware failure was scheduled to execute. Feigning polite interest in their utterly hollow corporate compliments, Bradley casually shifted his physical stance to subtly inspect the immediate environmental surroundings without raising any sudden suspicion from his treacherous colleagues. His meticulously trained gaze drifted slowly upward toward the intricate ceiling corners, where the state-of-the-art surveillance lenses were securely mounted to continuously monitor the high-value gala attendees. Instead of correctly executing their standard programmed sweeping panoramic motion, the metallic camera housing positioned directly above the designated VIP enclosure remained completely frozen in a stubbornly fixed downward angle, with its tiny operational red recording light definitively extinguished. The highly sophisticated automated building management system had already initiated its silent isolation protocol, deliberately blinding the external security command center to whatever unimaginable technological horrors were about to unfold inside this specific architectural zone. Maintaining his perfectly composed executive facade, Derek gracefully raised his crystal champagne flute high into the air to offer a celebratory toast, while smiling widely with absolute predatory triumph. And simultaneously, the dry mechanical sound of heavy magnetic locks engaging echoed sharply from all four corners of the enclosed room. The melodious jazz music was abruptly cut off by a long, piercing screech, emitting directly from the central speaker system, echoing painfully across the crowded banquet hall. Instantly, the heavy, reinforced steel main doors slammed shut, with a deafening metallic, thus permanently sealing the luxurious architectural perimeter and trapping every single high-profile guest inside the designated perimeter. Almost immediately, the overhead ventilation grates stopped blowing cool, conditioned air and began aggressively pumping a dense, odorless synthetic gas, specifically formulated to artificially suppress human heart rates and induce rapid, irreversible unconsciousness. The previously composed crowd of wealthy tech elites and powerful politicians instantly erupted into absolute blind panic, dropping their expensive imported champagne flutes and trampling viciously over each other in a desperately futile stampede toward the securely locked primary exits. Highly educated billionaires and sophisticated socialites abandoned all pretenses of civilized behavior, clawing uselessly at the unbreakable reinforced glass panels while gasping aggressively for clean air that was rapidly disappearing from the massive enclosed room, leaving many collapsing weakly onto their knees in sheer despair. Unlike the terrified executives screaming hopelessly against the unyielding doors, Bradley completely ignored the chaotic, violent surge of human bodies and instead pressed his concealed encrypted earpiece firmly against his right ear to establish a clear auditory connection. Gregory's highly urgent and deeply focused voice crackled sharply through the secure, restricted frequency, instructing the seasoned corporate executive to completely avoid the congested exit points where the chemical concentration was intentionally designed to be the absolute deadliest. The former independent contractor rapidly commanded him to navigate backward through the suffocating crowd and immediately locate a specific massive contemporary mural painted directly onto the western structural masonry wall. Fighting the initial dizzying neurological effects of the creeping toxic vapor, Bradley forcefully pushed past several hyperventilating board members and violently ripped the heavy canvas artwork away from its mounting brackets. Tearing down the expensive decoration successfully revealed a highly complex secondary maintenance circuit board, cleverly hidden within the original building infrastructure, exactly as the brilliant 10-year-old child had warned them earlier. Following the rapid, highly technical wire splicing commands transmitted continuously by his hidden ally down in the basement, Bradley utilized a small titanium executive pen extracted quickly from his inner suit pocket to forcefully pry open the thick plastic protective housing. Removing the outer shell completely exposed a dense, tangled web of raw, multicolored electrical wiring, pulsating with live alternating current. His peripheral vision began to blur dangerously, and his usually steady hands shook involuntarily as the suffocating artificial atmosphere thickened significantly, reducing the available oxygen levels within his straining lungs. Drawing upon every ounce of his remaining physical willpower, he forced his trembling fingers deep into the dangerous electrical cavity to physically cross two specific exposed copper conduits, actively bypassing the heavily corrupted automated lockdown software protocol initiated maliciously by his extremely treacherous corporate colleagues who were likely watching this unfold from a secure remote location. This desperate manual intervention successfully disrupted the malicious digital command sequence, halting the complete hermetic sealing of the secondary external air intake valves located near the ceiling structure. The violent mechanical override forced a narrow physical gap to remain permanently wedged open just wide enough to allow a continuous steady stream of fresh external oxygen to violently rush inward, fighting back aggressively against the settling toxic vapor and preventing mass asphyxiation. The severely compromised exposed circuit board suddenly sparked violently, sending a brilliant, chaotic shower of bright orange electrical embers cascading downward onto the plush carpeted floor, while the massive digital LED screen mounted prominently on the adjacent decorative wall simultaneously flashed a stark, blindingly bright crimson message indicating a comprehensive total system failure. Complete darkness swallowed the narrow service corridor entirely as Bradley and Gregory forcefully pried open the heavy auxiliary fire escape door using a discarded solid steel crowbar. Their immediate initial plan was to sprint directly up the concrete emergency stairwell toward the primary core server command center. But that logical conventional escape route was instantly thwarted upon entry. The extremely thick reinforced security portal leading to the vertical stair steps featured a blinking digital keypad that had been entirely overridden, displaying a solid crimson lock symbol indicating a total system quarantine covering the entire architectural sector. The exceptionally cunning rogue chief operating officer had perfectly anticipated this exact structural bottleneck, effectively neutralizing the standard pedestrian evacuation pathways. With the conventional concrete stairs completely inaccessible, the seasoned former cybersecurity contractor directed the exhausted billionaire toward a nearby brushed steel panel, hiding the high-speed executive elevator network serving the upper corporate penthouses. Forcing their bruised, calloused hands deep into the minuscule rubberized gap between the extremely heavy sliding doors, both determined men strained their aching muscles to the absolute breaking point until the mechanical safety latches finally snapped backward, yielding to their desperate physical leverage. Stepping cautiously into the cavernous vertical abyss, they were immediately greeted by a freezing severe updraft that whipped fiercely through the pitch-black hollow concrete throat of the towering Seattle skyscraper, stinging their sweat-drenched faces. The sheer dizzying drop, extending hundreds of empty feet below them, was completely invisible in the total darkness, but the terrifying psychological weight of the immense empty altitude pressed heavily against their severely oxygen-deprived lungs, making every single breath an agonizing struggle. They had absolutely no alternative choice except to immediately begin the grueling vertical ascent utilizing the slick, grease-covered maintenance ladder bolted dangerously close to the primary active suspension tracks. Bradley systematically forced his expensive custom leather dress shoes onto the incredibly narrow metallic rungs, entirely abandoning his polished corporate persona to mentally survive this brutally exhausting physical ordeal, while Gregory followed closely beneath him, providing constant tactical guidance. Every single upward movement demanded immense muscular effort as the atmospheric oxygen grew remarkably thinner with each passing floor, aggressively pushing their fragile human endurance to its absolute biological limits. Far below them, the heavily armed professional mercenary team hired exclusively by Derek had already violently breached the lower service levels, wearing advanced tactical stealth combat gear, and carrying highly specialized technological tracking equipment specifically designed for urban hunting. These ruthless, professional enforcers did not foolishly waste their precious time blindly shooting their automatic weapons into the dark, empty shadows, but instead rapidly deployed sophisticated military-grade acoustic sonar scanners designed specifically to detect the faintest ambient biological vibrations traveling through the building framework. The highly sensitive handheld receivers quickly picked up the distinct rhythmic metallic echoing of two desperate men physically climbing the hollow vertical shaft, broadcasting their exact elevated spatial coordinates directly back to the heavily armed tactical strike team waiting in the lobby. Realizing they could not simply shoot upward effectively through the dense structural steel crossbeams, the ruthless squad leader issued a chillingly quiet encrypted command over his secure radio frequency to manually override the dormant elevator engine room positioned at the very top of the massive skyscraper. They maliciously intended to drop the massive multi-ton steel passenger carriage directly down the central vertical track, effectively crushing the fleeing executives like insignificant fragile insects trapped helplessly inside a giant mechanical descending piston. Without any prior audible warning, the extremely heavy industrial braking mechanism positioned far above them suddenly disengaged with a terrifyingly loud metallic groan vibrating through the entire building infrastructure. The incredibly thick woven steel cable vibrated violently, sliding rapidly through the massive overhead iron pulley with an absolutely ear-piercing mechanical shriek. The magnetic steel door of the core server room had barely cracked open when it exhaled a scorching blast of intense heat from the wildly overtaxing supercomputers. Stepping into the blindingly bright digital sanctuary, Bradley immediately spotted Derek and Vanessa standing confidently before the primary mainframe console, actively preparing to execute a complete catastrophic wipe of the corporate data archives. The elegant head of legal held a sleek metallic tablet displaying the final countdown sequence designed specifically to trigger a massive thermal overload that would entirely incinerate the physical evidence of their massive financial crimes. The undeniable truth regarding the heavily concealed $50 million embezzlement was finally laid bare on the massive glowing monitors, revealing dozens of complex offshore shell company accounts explicitly tied directly to the treacherous chief operating officer and his equally complicit wife. Derek sneered maliciously while proudly confessing that the impending explosive destruction of this vital technological nerve center would successfully bury his massive theft forever, while simultaneously framing the deceased chief executive officer for the disastrous corporate failure, leaving their pristine reputations completely untarnished. Refusing to succumb to their psychological intimidation, Bradley slowly advanced across the vibrating raised floor panels, projecting an aura of absolute unwavering executive authority despite the suffocating heat. He calmly informed the arrogant conspirators that their meticulously planned digital sabotage was completely fundamentally flawed because a highly perceptive 10-year-old child had already uncovered the hidden, fatal vulnerability within their localized bypass protocol. Vanessa initially laughed, mocking the absurd notion that an insignificant janitor's daughter could possibly comprehend their advanced malicious software architecture. But her confident expression faltered slightly when Bradley began flawlessly reciting the exact alphanumeric override sequence Samantha had written on her small palm. He expertly weaponized the young girl's brilliant technical discovery, aggressively manipulating Vanessa's inherent paranoid legal mindset by forcefully explaining that executing the thermal destruction command right now would not erase the offshore transaction logs, but instead instantly broadcast the unencrypted financial records directly to federal regulatory authorities and international banking tribunals. The terrifying psychological realization that their perfect criminal master plan might actually contain a catastrophic hidden trap caused Vanessa to instinctively freeze her manicured fingers, hovering uncertainly over the glowing red execution icon on her portable tablet. Seizing that fleeting critical moment of internal division, Bradley lunged aggressively across the narrow walkway to physically wrestle the fragile device away from his deceitful colleague. A brutal, chaotic struggle instantly erupted amidst the deafening roar of the overheating cooling fans as Derek violently intercepted the desperate tackle, throwing his entire physical weight against his former college friend to fiercely protect their stolen fortune. The two powerful men crashed heavily against a towering rack of blinking servers, trading vicious, uncoordinated blows that echoed loudly throughout the confined metallic chamber, while the ambient room temperature continued rising dangerously toward the critical ignition threshold. Vanessa shrieked loudly, dropping the cracked tablet onto the steel grating, retreating backward into a darkened corner as the intense physical brawl edged perilously close to the unprotected primary control terminal. Bleeding from a deep cut above his right eye, Bradley desperately attempted to pin the enraged executive against the reinforced glass wall, but the sheer adrenaline-fueled desperation of facing lifetime imprisonment gave the corrupt officer an unexpected burst of raw animalistic strength. Breaking violently free from the exhausted billionaire's grappling hold, Derek spun around wildly, grabbing a heavy metal wrench from a nearby tool cart with pure murderous intent flashing brightly in his bloodshot eyes. Refusing to accept total defeat and absolutely determined to annihilate the entire building rather than face undeniable public humiliation, Derek's hand lunged forward, smashing violently onto the master control keyboard. The deafeningly piercing alarm sound suddenly fell completely silent, replaced immediately by a blindingly brilliant white light, illuminating simultaneously from every single master monitor across the room. Instead of triggering the catastrophic thermal overload, the desperately hammered control keyboard executed the highly sophisticated reversal algorithm that Samantha had ingeniously memorized from the ventilation shaft. The deeply embedded malicious code was instantly overwritten, stripping Derek of all administrative privileges while simultaneously ripping down the heavy encrypted firewalls, protecting his illicit offshore bank accounts. Every single detailed record documenting the massive financial fraud, along with incredibly clear audio recordings of their murderous conspiracy, began broadcasting live across multiple global financial networks and internal corporate servers, ensuring maximum public exposure. The arrogant chief operating officer stumbled backward in absolute horrified disbelief, watching helplessly as his meticulously constructed empire of lies evaporated into digital dust right before his wide, panicked eyes. Vanessa collapsed onto her knees, covering her pale face as the horrifying realization set in that their meticulously planned perfect crime had just mutated into a highly publicized, undeniable confession of attempted mass murder and unprecedented corporate theft. Less than 15 minutes later, heavily armed tactical units from the Seattle Police Department violently breached the steel doors to physically apprehend the utterly defeated conspirators without encountering any further resistance. The Specialized Cybercrime Division immediately confiscated all encrypted drives, permanently securing the damning evidence before the corrupt executives could possibly contact their high-priced defense attorneys. The swift and unforgiving judicial system of Washington state showed absolutely no mercy toward the treacherous couple during the highly publicized criminal trial that completely captivated the entire nation several months later. Facing an overwhelming mountain of irrefutable digital evidence, both Derek and Vanessa received consecutive life sentences in maximum security federal penitentiaries without any possibility of early parole, officially marking the definitive end of their arrogant reign. The terrifying media spectacle served as a powerful global warning against unchecked corporate greed and reckless ambition. In the quiet aftermath of the unprecedented corporate scandal, Bradley meticulously ensured that the true unsung heroes of that terrifying night were exceptionally well rewarded for their incredible bravery. Operating entirely anonymously through a complex network of philanthropic trusts, the grateful billionaire completely paid off the fraudulent mortgage threatening Heather, guaranteeing that the hard-working mother would never face financial terror again. Furthermore, he established a massive, unrestricted educational endowment specifically designated for Samantha, providing unlimited resources to nurture her extraordinary technological genius at any elite academic institution she eventually chose to attend. Relocated to a beautiful, peaceful suburban neighborhood surrounded by lush green parks, the small family finally experienced the deep, comforting security they had always desperately deserved, far away from the toxic shadows of the towering corporate skyscrapers. Standing quietly on the pristine front porch of her brand new home, holding a brand new advanced engineering textbook, the brilliant 10-year-old girl reflected deeply on the incredibly chaotic events that had fundamentally altered their lives forever. She calmly concluded that genuine power never actually resides in wearing expensive tailored suits or possessing vast amounts of stolen wealth, but rather in maintaining unwavering moral integrity and possessing the quiet intellectual capacity to keenly observe what others foolishly ignore. Her courageous actions definitively proved to the entire world that the boundless arrogance of the so-called untouchable elite will always inevitably crumble when confronted directly by the undeniable illuminating light of absolute truth, combined with the razor-sharp wisdom of a chronically underestimated underdog. Looking out over the vibrant, peaceful neighborhood, she gently smiled, knowing her profoundly transformative journey was truly just beginning today.